Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to have England's best bowler in the 1990s, Angus Fraser. Thanks a lot, Angus, for joining me on this chat. Hope you're doing well in this lockdown phase around the world.
Yeah, I'm not so bad. I say frustrating because the weather's beautiful outside and we should be playing cricket in England, but we're not. We're obviously there's bigger things happening, and we're waiting for hopefully some positive news sometime in the future that we can get out there and start playing again. But it's frustrating at the moment, and looking at my hands, I'm decorating the outside of the house, so trying not to waste my time.
Uh, Tell us something about your early days. You were Lancashire born, and then you played for Middlesex. How was that? And your brother also, Alistair, he also played first class cricket for, if I'm not mistaken, Essex and Middlesex. Tell us something about your early days growing up in Lancashire.
Well, we weren't there very long. I mean, basically, my mum's family, well, both my parents' families are from Greater Manchester, a place called Leeds, Hillesley, Astley, on the East Lancashire Road, which is halfway between Liverpool and Manchester. But my father's work took us away from Manchester or Lancashire when I was two. So I don't really have any strong. My brother, Alistair, he was born in Edgware in Middlesex, and he's only 2 years younger than me. So we'd moved to London by the time Alistair was born. And yeah, I mean, we're sort of living in a sort of Harrow Weald, a suburb of Greater London. Father, sports mad, loves sport, particularly cricket. Mum, very supportive. And two young boys playing sport in the street, in the garden, at school. I mean, lucky, as they would, it's one of those things where you look at your career and you actually sort of think that a lot of things fell into place, like you have a brother rather than a sister, so you've got someone to play sport with more often. You're in a street where there's three or four other boys of a similar age to you that enjoy playing sport, and you're out in the road as you could have been in those days. It was a quiet sort of little sort of cul-de-sac that we lived in, so there weren't cars whizzing along all the time. And then you go to a school where cricket is very much on the curriculum, and there's another 8 or 10 or a dozen cricket mad boys there that you're constantly in your year that you're constantly playing cricket with in the playground day after day after day. So those sort of things come together. But my father, I mean, he joined when they moved to London. My father joined the local cricket club, which was Stanmore Cricket Club, and he was never a great player, my father. He sort of played a couple of games in the first 11, captained the second and the thirds. And as Alistair and my brother and I came through the sort of Stanmore Colts, if the third 11 was short and he was captain on a Saturday morning, we'd be drafted into play at the age of 13 and 14. And if we weren't playing, some were messing around in the nets and playing cricket. So, yeah, a sort of childhood with lots of opportunities to sort of play sport, and a childhood incredibly well supported by your parents as well, who drive you around to matches and allow you to play the game. And I suppose incidentally, then you're developing as a cricketer. It's not that you were being coached and told what to do, but just by playing the game, watching the game on television, I say just being involved in the cricket environment, you sort of you develop your own sort of skills and way of playing it.
And your height, did it naturally take you towards seam bowling, or were you first considering yourself to be a batsman or an all-rounder?
I was a batsman.
Those were both. I said because those were Botham days. That's why.
Yeah, and I think you look at. I mean, I was 16 in 1981, so the Ashes series then, and undoubtedly both had a big influence on you as a youngster, and probably made you want to be a cricketer in many ways, because sort of sitting down on the sofa and watching his heroics against Australia that summer were inspirational. I'm sure they did have a big influence, but there were other cricketers that you like watching. I mean, Graham Dilley was always someone you liked. So I think it was fast bowlers that you liked, sort of Dennis Lilly, your Graham Dilley's type of bowlers and Bob Willis that you enjoyed watching. But yeah, I was a batsman. I opened the batting when I was at school, not particularly well, and I used to bowl first change. And then I was reasonable height, but then sort of about 16 or 17, I shot up. I sort of grew 6 inches probably in a very short space of time, and all of a sudden, maybe getting a bit more aggressive, getting a bit bigger. my bowling suddenly became a different sort of proposition for opponents, and my batting sort of fell to the wayside a bit because my bowling sort of came forward, and as you probably saw during my Test career, my batting sort of faded away quite alarmingly at times.
I'll come to your batting because there are some funny stories about that as well. But about your bowling, you sort of quipped later on that your accuracy was your strength, and you said I spent 95% of my career bowling the same ball. Uh, did that sum up for you what your career was in your eyes?
Yeah, I think. I've obviously worked for Middlesex now. I'm sort of director of cricket, managing director of cricket at Middlesex. So I'm not sort of hands-on coaching. Stuart Law is Middlesex's coach, but I sort of in a way, your method of bowling sort of is your personality. And if you are sort of slightly grumpy, begrudging, sort of not miserly, sort of with money, but sort of don't like giving much away. That's the style of bowling that you go on, and it's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't say they're great friends, but they're good friends. You sort of Glenn McGrath's, your Curtly Ambroses, Sean Pollocks, people like that, and almost you get us in the room, and you're the same animal. You've got the same outlook on life. You sort of same approach to bowling, and in many ways to sort of be a sort of happy-go-lucky figure that sort of is a bit of a gambler. You wouldn't bowl like I bowled. You'll be more likely to be an away swing or a swing bowler that's pitching it up and accepts that some days it's going to happen and some days it's not. But I suppose I quickly sort of got into a mindset, and I think I say everybody's strengths are their weaknesses too. So the fact that maybe I worked out my limitations at quite a young age and sort of said, well, this is the style of bowler that I am, and this is the style of bowling that I'm going to try and produce for my career, and I stuck to that quite rigidly. Is a strength and a weakness. A strength in the way that I didn't sort of get distracted. I didn't try things and suddenly sort of like a lot of some bowlers, they sort of almost go through their career and you say, well, what style of bowler are you? Whereas obviously mine was hitting a good length hard, top of off stump, giving the batsman nothing. I mean, I just worked on simple principles. That if I took my wickets at an average of 25, I was a fine bowler. If I'm going for 2.5 runs and over, which is I'm keeping control, then I only have to get a wicket every 10 overs. And that was sort of a policy that I came. If you're going for 4 and over, you have to get a wicket every 7 overs or 6 or 7 overs to sort of average 25. So sort of in some ways by being more accurate, taking pressure off yourself. And also it used to annoy me a bit when I was younger. So within England, there were other bowlers that I suppose you were competing with, your Neil Fosters at a younger age, Jonathan Agnew, or you're being compared to Paul Jarvis, Philip Freitas, and Graham Dillian, people like that. And they were sort of attacking bowlers. And I was considered to be a defensive bowler, and I could never really work that one out because I was trying to take a wicket every ball. I just felt that sort of saying someone was an attacking that bowler was almost an excuse for them bowling bad balls. Because they're trying different things. They're trying away swingers, in swingers, Yorkers, bang, bang, bang. I just worked on the principle. If I bowled a ball on a good length at about 82 miles, 85 miles an hour, and it nipped away, and it didn't matter whether you were Sachin Tendulkar, Don Bradman, or Brian Lara, you're going to struggle to get a bat on it. And my method, my sort of perfect wicket was almost a good length ball, batsman sort of nowhere, not going with it, find it hard to get forward, it's too full to get back on that in between length. Outside edge, caught second slip. That was almost your perfect delivery of just a bat. You sort of just working at an area where there's indecision in a batsman's mind, and then pushing at balls that they should leave alone, and bang, nicking it to slips and things like that. So it was a sort of very simple, pragmatic approach that I had to my bowling, and that worked in some conditions. In other conditions, maybe I didn't tour the subcontinent a huge amount in my career. Maybe I'd have had to try something different, and therefore you understand why I suppose the great bowlers of the 90s that sort of were Wasim and Wakar, the way they took the pitch out of the equation, fast in swing, out swing, reverse swing, Yorkers, things like that. Being a sort of more traditional English style bowler and playing a lot of cricket in England, I didn't have to develop those skills, whereas as they did. So whilst you're a product of your own personality, you're also a product of the conditions you bowl on as a youngster, or you grow up in, aren't you?
And when you got a call to play for England in the 1989 Ashes, you did better than all the guys you mentioned, Graham Dilly, Paul Jarvis, Ian Botham. What did you make of your debut when you look back now?
Well, when I look back, I sort of, I played in a brilliant team. So I was brought up in a brilliant environment, Middlesex. So I joined Middlesex in the mid-80s. The team then was Slack, Barlow, Gatting, Radley, Roland Butcher, Paul Downton, John Embry, Phil Edmonds, Wayne Daniel, Norman Cowans, Neil Williams. A magnificent side that were winning titles. And I think by playing in that side or being in that environment, Don Bennett was the coach, and he was a magnificent sort of mentor in many ways as well. He sort of told you what was right and wrong, and sort of kept you on the straight. If you varied, he'd sort of knock you back in line. So you grow up as a professional in a really good, strong, positive, successful environment. And without being arrogant, I felt I could have been playing for England a little bit earlier than I did. A big game for myself was a NatWest final, which was a domestic one-day final in 1988. We played Worcestershire. First time you're playing at Lord's in front of a full house of 30,000 people, and you bowl well. You get 3 for 30 odd. You get Graham Hickett, who was their gun player, and played an important part in Middlesex winning that game. And I think from that moment on, you think, well, yes, I can handle this occasion. So, yeah, of course, going into your test debut, you're incredibly nervous and want to do well. But equally, I think I'd played enough good cricket in a good side to know that what I had or what I could offer had a chance of being successful. So, and to go in there and bowl well on your debut, I think I got 4 for 60 odd in 30 odd overs. I suppose endorsed that and really showed myself and everybody else that it wasn't just the wickets that were important, it's the fact that you're only going for 2 and over against a very good Australian side with sort of Mark Taylor, Marsh, Boone, Border, Dean Jones, Steve Waugh. So it's an excellent Australian side, and you're bowling well against them, keeping them under sort of control, and obviously taking wickets. So I think success at or moving into international level to sort of get success early on is so important, because that does give you a real confidence that you can compete at that level. And there are a lot of players, I mean, a couple sort of in England that the people will know about, with Graham Hickey and Mark Ramprakash, 2 outstanding cricketers, but they had to wait a long time for their first success with England, and therefore I think the confidence they got from that is not as strong as the confidence you get from doing well very early on in your career.
And you particularly seem to enjoy playing against the West Indies. I was looking at your record. In 17 test matches, you got 70 wickets, including 5 5-4s and 1 10-4. You were part of the 1990 tour, 94 and 98. England won in 1990 for the first time. 94, you took 8 for 75 in West Indies' first defeat at Barbados in a very long time. And then 8 for 53 again when you went again in 98 in Port of Spain. What was it about West Indies that brought out the best in you?
I suppose that, I mean, the fact I did well in the West Indies, you sort of wonder how you'd have, and I suppose that's a great unknown for myself, is how would I have performed in the subcontinent? I always look at sort of Sri Lanka, I might have struggled, Pakistan, I think India I might have bowled all right actually, because the pitches there do grip a little bit for the seamers every now and then. But I suppose, and therefore, and the West Indies isn't too far away from the subcontinent in the type of surfaces that you're playing on. But I just think it's a number of, I mean, you look, I mean, I was a pretty good bowler, but not a great bowler in the way that a Curtly Ambrose was. And Ambrose was I'm sort of Paul Mann's Ambrose type of bowler myself. But Ambrose did well there. And why? Because I think everybody sort of had this opinion that the West Indies pitches were fast and bouncing. They weren't really. They were quite sort of slow and low. And therefore, a lot. Sometimes I wasn't quick enough to. I mean, I struggled in Australia. I certainly struggled in Perth anyway in Australia, because, and yet that's supposed to be a great pitch for fast bowlers to bowl on, because I wasn't really quick enough to sort of intimidate batsmen, and they could sort of bide their time, trust the bounce, leave a lot of balls, and therefore for me to bowl balls that are going to be LBW or bowled, it's you're entering the territory of half volley being driven sort of length, and I wasn't quick enough to get people on the back foot, and therefore trap them. Sort of, they were always looking to get forward. So in Australia and maybe South Africa, a lot of balls go above the stumps or miss the stumps. But in the West Indies, a lot of balls would hit the stumps because they're slower, lower pitches. So therefore, my accuracy, bowling a lot of balls that threaten off stump in the same way that an Ambrose does, and also I think it's my style of bowling, the nature of the pitches, and I think that the West Indian batsmen like to get on top, like to play, or in that generation anyway, like to sort of play aggressive, attractive cricket. And I suppose my patience was greater than theirs, and it brought rewards in many ways because, I think it's a combination of 2 or 3 and also I just love playing in the Caribbean. I mean, we go there on holidays regularly, hoping to go again later this year, back to Barbados. I was sort of felt it's changed now. Sadly, cricket's not got the same sort of. It's got support. There's still a lot of interest in cricket, but it's not supported in the way that people turn up. But playing in the Caribbean, it was like a celebration. It was each island's big week of the year. England were in town, certainly in a couple of venues at Antigua, Barbados. 8,000 or 10,000 England supporters there. They were just fantastic occasions. Test matches in the Caribbean. They were it was how cricket. You felt it was cricket how it should be played. It's slightly raw. Facilities weren't great, but lots of noise, lots of excitement, lots of energy, and lots of high-quality cricketers as well. So I think there are a lot of things that just sort of made playing, for me anyway, playing in the Caribbean a real joy.
Is it true that in the 1994 Test match at Antigua, when Brian Lara was scoring his famous 375, you actually advised him to play carefully when he sort of played and missed a few times? So should Mike Atherton be picking one with you on that?
No, well, I was a journalist writing for Lara's 400, and I think probably the 400 is a better innings, only because if you do something once, you pay something incredible once, you pay real attention to detail, and to reach that landmark. So going past Gary Sober's record was a real feat in sort of concentration as well as skill. But then to go there again, when you're trying to do something that you've done once, again, you try and cut corners and try and get there quicker, and then you make a mistake and it ends. So for Brian Lara to sort of come back and score 400 a few months after Matthew Hayden obviously went past him on 380, I thought in many ways was a more remarkable performance than the 375. But yeah, that test was after the one we won in Barbados that you mentioned, where I got 8 for, and Lara was on about 320, and he played and missed me twice and then over. And I sort of, on my follow through, I basically said, I suppose I can't call you a lucky so and so. Well, I won't use the language, but I can't call you a lucky so and so when you're on 320, can I? I look at. Lara's the greatest player, and again, that's slightly contentious because obviously Sachin Tendulkar is one of the greatest players that's ever lived. But I'd say Brian Lara is the greatest cricketer that I played against. And yes, I got him out a few times, and yes, he got a number of hundred against England sides that I was playing in. But you look at that man and you think he's probably played half a dozen of the best 20 innings that have ever been played in the history of the game. And 500. 400, 375. He got 270 against Aussies when Warne was in his pump on a turning pitch. He got double hundreds in Sri Lanka against Muralitharan at his best, and I think he got 150 against Australia in Barbados, which to win a Test match was one of the greatest innings that I've ever seen. So, yeah, Lara was something special.
And you yourself with the bat were capable of some surprises. Seeing a match on YouTube the other day where you almost won a match for England against Australia in the 91 Ashes series in a one-day match, and you hit a huge 6 of Steve Waugh, and then you saved a Test match later on in your career against South Africa in 98 with Robert Croft. And your bat has a special story. I believe your bat was designed by your mother, and you used to have stickers which said with messages, "Good day, Richie." What is all that about? That's a story to tell.
Well, I think now, I mean, I wasn't a hopeless batsman. As I said, when I was young, I used to own the batting for the school, Gate High School. And it slowly faded away. And I think in the current era where lower order batsmen do practice their skills, I would have been better. I mean, what did I average? Probably 11 or 12 in my career. It should have been 4 or 5. It should have been mid to high teens, really. And if I'd have worked a bit harder, it would have been. But in those days, a batsman or a bowler having a bat at the end of the training session was just keeping everybody at the ground for another 25 minutes when they all wanted to go home. But nowadays, it's compulsory the batsmen have to bat, and therefore you do see lower order batsmen scoring some useful runs. So I should have worked harder at my batting, but no, my mum never. It's one of those ones that my mum didn't design my bats actually. But what happened, I suppose, top batsmen get paid huge sums of money for using bats, and understandably so, because they sell millions or thousands or millions of bats on the back of using their equipment. But as a bowler, you didn't get much money, and there was, I think, I sort of, my contract with a company was up, and basically the company offered me £2,000 to use their bats. All right, it's money, but it's, your agent takes 20%. So you're left with £1,600. The taxman's going to take 40% of that, so you're probably getting £1,000 in your pocket. And the bat manufacturer is asking you to do this, that, turn up and show your face and have some pictures taken. I just thought, I can't be bothered with this. I'll just use a blank bat. So I was using blank bats, and I just thought I'd have a bit of fun by just putting a message on the back of it. So yeah, I started with "Good day, Richie," because just because of the stump cameras had come into cricket, so therefore stump cameras obviously went there as you took guard, and I just sort of had "Good day, Richie" on the back of my bat. And then all of a sudden, a bat manufacturer in Kent brought out a bat. It was to the West Indies actually in 1998. They just brought a bat out, and it was a proper bat, and it was a lovely bat actually. It had a really good middle line. And there was a sort of like a carving etched in the back, which was of me bowling, a sort of cartoon caricature of myself bowling. And they'd left a little space at the top for me to sort of, on a bit of physio tape that I used to do, put my message and then take it out. And so that was the first one. And then that bat company sort of, I forgot what the bat company's name was now. Should remember it. But they did me a bat each season. So there were different sort of caricatures on the back. It backfired horribly though. So England went to Australia. So in '98, I had that one for the West Indies. That one was brought out for the West Indies in '98, '97, '98. Used a different bat during the '98, and then '98, '99. I had a good summer in '98 against South Africa, and it was an Ashes winter, '98, '99. And the design on the back of the bat was of a lion, so an English lion, sort of looking quite fearsome with a ball in his hand, and a kangaroo with a bat looking very timid at the bottom. So that was my bat for an Ashes, and it seemed like a good idea at the time, but you think about it now and it was a bit stupid really. So the first test match in Brisbane takes its usual format. Australia get about 470. England are about 220 for 8 when I go out to bat with my bat. So we're getting our backsides kicked by Australia again. And as I take guard, Ian Healy was behind the stump, sort of said, "Nice bat, Gus." And I said, "Yeah, it's all right." And he just said, I won't use his language again, but basically he said it should be the other way round though, i.e. a lion looking timid bowling the ball, and a kangaroo looking very sort of intimidating with the bat the other way round. So yeah, we lost that Ashes series, so that sort of bit of fun didn't sort of slightly backfired on me.
Were you disappointed that you sort of got left out after the '99 World Cup and went in a different direction as England? Were you disappointed the way your England career ended?
Yeah, I think I could have played that summer, '99. I mean, obviously, I suppose the disappointing thing was sort of, I mean, I had a very good, I think I'd taken 54 wickets in 2 Test series that in '98 against the West Indies and then against South Africa. So I'd had 2 very good back-to-back series. And then we went to Australia. And Australia lets you know where you are as a cricketer. I mean, if you're young, fit, strong, capable, you'll thrive. If you've got weaknesses, they'll be exposed because the weather, you've got to be fit and strong. The pitches, you've got to be fit and strong. They're hard on your body. The cricket's tough because they're excellent cricketers. So if you're on top of your game and you're a good cricketer, you will do well in Australia. But if you're vulnerable and weak and maybe slightly past it, you could get exposed. And I think sort of England I'd almost made their mind up, I think, before we went to Australia that sort of it might not be Fraser's sort of place this. So I played in the first Test in Brisbane that was a draw. I mean, the test where I was just talking about with my bat, it rained for the last day and a bit, so that was abandoned as a draw. And then I got dropped for the second Test match in Adelaide. So I think I got 2 wickets in the game. So it was not great returns, and I hadn't bowled badly, but I bowled more overs than most of the other seamers. But I got dropped, and then I got recalled because Alex Tudor was injured on Boxing Day and didn't bowl very well in that game. I managed to burgle a couple of wickets there, but England won that Test match. Dean Headley bowled brilliantly, and I suppose signs were on the wall there that sort of England might be moving in another direction. And there was the World Cup in England that summer, '99, which from an England's perspective was a disaster. Well, we didn't even get past the group stages, so to be the home country and not get past the group stage was a bit of a disaster. And with that, there was a change. So David Lloyd disappeared as coach. Alex Stewart disappeared as captain. And I suppose with that, it's right, there's a line in the sand here, and we're now going to sort of try and take this team forward in a different direction. And myself being 34, yeah, 34, probably nearing the end, and the others wanted to take the sort of bring some new fresh blood in. So I don't think I was horribly cheated. I could have probably played that summer. England played New Zealand that summer. I'm sure I'd bowled quite well there. But you sit back and you played international cricket for a decade, had injuries, had some sort of not been selected or not been looked on favourably by a couple of selectors, which is frustrating. And so it'd have been nice to have played another 20 Test matches, taken another 80 wickets, sort of ended up with 252, 60 wickets at an average of 27. I think that would have been a truer reflection of what I was capable of achieving. But no, you sit back now and you're pretty proud of what you've done, and your record stands up sort of favourably to any English bowler, really. So yeah, it'd have been nice to have played that summer, nice to have played a bit more before then, and sort of be a bit higher. I know not that you're in it for records, but you just see year after year bowlers going past you. So there was sort of at one stage I think I was in the top 10 wicket takers, and then you've got Hoggard, Harmison, Flintoff, Swan, Anderson, Broad, Gough, Caddick. They sort of suddenly go past you, and you sort of slip down the pecking order.
But you slipped into the role of being a journalist quite effortlessly. I remember seeing you in India in 2006 and also in the World Cup in 2007. Was it an easy switch, and how as a former cricketer were you able to switch to being a journalist? And did it give you a different perspective as a journalist to look at cricket?
Well, when I was playing for England, a lot of, I mean, it's still the same now, isn't it? A lot of players have columns in newspapers, and I sort of wrote I did a diary piece in the Sunday Telegraph, and Shield Berry was the cricket correspondent on the Sunday, and I don't know whether it was Shield giving me good advice or Shield, because he couldn't be bothered to ghostwrite my copy. He sort of said, well, why don't you ever go writing it yourself? So I started writing things myself, and sort of the skill of writing or trying to put things together. And yeah, he'd be tidied up by the office, of course. So that got known around the circuit that you were writing it rather than it was being ghostwritten as such. And I suppose people are quite liking what you're doing. And then, as a cricketer, you sit there and you think, all right, I mean, the top players now, quite rightly, earning fantastic money. I mean, and they'll be able to pick and choose what they want to do when they stop playing cricket. And I'm sure there'll be lots of opportunities for the top players. But in those days, we weren't sort of earning a fortune. You were worried about what you were going to do because you hadn't got enough money to sort of mess around. You had to sort of slip into something that paid you a certain amount of money straight after your career. And what are you going to do? And it was, I suppose, the winter of 2001, 2002. I'd gone away with Test Match Special. I was doing some columns then, I think, for The Guardian. And there was some movement in the media. So I think Ian Waldridge at the Daily Mail had retired. Michael Henderson had gone from the Telegraph to the Mail. And Derek Pringle had been taken from the Independent to the Telegraph. So that sort of left a position vacant at the Independent. And I'd come back from New Zealand in March to sort of prepare for the... England was still in New Zealand, but I'd come back a bit early because I was captain at Middlesex. And to get involved in Middlesex's pre-season. And I've been home a few days, and all of a sudden the phone came, and it was Paul Newman who was the sports editor of the Independent. He sort of said, "Could I meet you for a bit of lunch? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." So he sort of spoke about that, and what are you going to do? So I left that option open. Then a couple of days later, I had lunch with him and Simon Kellner, who was the editor of the newspaper, and they offered me the job. And it was a tough call because, I mean, cricket's been your life. I mean, since you were sort of 14, you'd wanted to be a cricketer. So for 20 years, it had pretty much playing cricket had dominated everything that you'd done. And you still felt that you had another year or two possibly in you. But equally, is an opportunity like this going to come around again? So I had to make a tough call. I had a number of sort of phone calls with people I respect at Middlesex, like Alan Moss and Don Bennett, who sort of said, look, you don't know Middlesex anything. You've performed well for the club. You've given your all for the club. You've got to make the right decision for yourself and your family. And that was to sadly retire from playing and to go straight into the press box. And yeah, it's an interesting one because there's a bit of animosity in the press box to cricketers that come in. Obviously, the journalists have gone through from the bottom and got themselves into a position where they're vying for one of the top jobs or one of the most attractive jobs, which is the cricket correspondent of a daily newspaper. And for me to come in sort of sideways and get one of those top jobs can create a bit of animosity, but I didn't really feel that. There's the odd comment here or there, but you're used to getting a bit of flack as a cricketer because you're standing on the boundary listening to the crowd. So there was nothing that sort of upset me. But I think the fact that I think that one of the things that the proper journalists sort of get annoyed with is that if a cricketer comes in and he doesn't respect the job and sort of expects other people to run around after him and collect the quotes and do all the hard work. But the fact that I sort of totally committed to this role, turned up at everything, tried to do the job in the same way that the proper qualified journalists had done it, and sort of quickly, I wouldn't say won them over, but quickly was accepted as part of the group and had 7 very enjoyable years as a cricket correspondent with the Independent. It was a fantastic paper to news work for. Not once was I told to take a view on anything or to go out there and write a piece in a certain way. They trusted me and just let me get on with covering the game and having the views that I had. yeah, it was a real joy working for them. And it wasn't. I didn't move back to Middlesex because I was fed up with writing. I moved back to Middlesex because it's time away from home. I mean, you spend 30 odd weeks of the year in a hotel room, which sounds attractive, but when you've got sort of 2 teenage children, you want to spend a bit of time with them before they sort of disappear and sort of get out of the way. So it was more for sort of family reasons that I stopped with the Independent, rather than I'd sort of lost enjoyment doing the job.
And how did the cricketers react to your writings? Did they appreciate the fact that, having done the hard yards yourself, you knew what it took to be an international cricketer or a professional cricketer? So were they more accepting of what you wrote?
I think I stirred a few up. I know I sort of certainly upset Duncan Fletcher, the England coach, on a couple of occasions. But I was quite comfortable with that. I mean, I think sometimes it's funny. I mean, obviously you write yourself, and some of your best pieces actually are when you are under real deadline pressure, and you've just got to say it and get it down. And rather than trying to be cute, or rather than trying to be clever, you just almost bang, I've got to get this done, and I write it as I think it and saw it. And sometimes that comes out brilliantly. Sometimes you might say something, oh, probably haven't got that quite right there, because in my haste to get my 800 words done in sort of 15 minutes, or whatever it might be, you've maybe been a bit harsh on someone there, and not really thought through what led up to that. But I was pretty comfortable, because if I was going to give someone some criticism, I'd have thought it through. I wouldn't be doing it just for sensationalism or just to get a good headline. And I think the players were okay with that. Yeah, you did stir a few up every now and then. No one likes being criticised, but every now and then you've got to say, sorry, Andrew Flintoff, that was poor. I mean, what you produced there was wrong, or what you're trying to do there was wrong. It's not been good enough. And I think I was very comfortable with that, if that was the case, and that's the position that I'd come to. And no one's fallen out with me. They're still speaking to me, so I've managed to keep those relationships intact. But equally, I don't know. We all sit in press conferences, and we all listen to, or we all did, and you all listen to quotes, and you know what he said. The quotes, if you take the quote literally, it could mean something than the context that it was said in. And I sort of struggle sometimes. Yeah, would sort of leave a press conference, and the sort of, and they've got a different job to do, the sort of tabloid journalist, rather than me with being a broadsheet. He said that, didn't he? And I said, yeah, but he said it, but he didn't mean it like that. He meant it like this. Nobody said it, didn't he? Yeah, but, and that was sort of a slightly harder nosed sort of tabloid journalism approach to myself, which was not forgiving, but sort of deliberately sort of, but equally not deliberately sort of misreading what had been said, because it sort of could give you a better intro or a better headline.
Now, it's been 12 years now since you quit journalism and went back to Middlesex. How have these 12 years been? Because you're doing a different role, decidedly, compared to, say, Stuart Law, who's the coach. But how do you look back at these 12 years at Middlesex?
The last 3 years have been tough. We've not played well, and that's been frustrating. Having sort of, I'd say, I mean, to sort of Middlesex, even though I joined the year after they won the domestic 2020 competition. So we won the domestic 2020 in 2008. I joined in 2009. But the club, if I'm being honest, wasn't in great shape. I don't think attitudes were right amongst the players. And there was a sort of, we were underachieving considerably. And I suppose to sort of change things around, and we won the second division in 2011. We're competing at the top of the first division for 2 or 3 years, and then obviously won the title in 2016. And I think that moment probably highlighted my career in many ways. To sort of, it's different. I mean, as a player, I bowled, and I had a set of figures on a piece of paper each day that suggested how well I'd done my job. As a journalist, there was 600,000-800,000 words there in black and white on a piece of paper that you could read, and you could say, "Oh, actually, that's quite good," or "It's all." but you could almost see the toils of your labour sort of on a daily basis. But in this current position, you sort of do what you do, and then they walk over that line and play the game, and you're in very little control, and your emotions are sort of in the hands of people that you've got little control over, and therefore it's quite hard at times. But equally, to get a group of people, and again, when you look at a cricket team, it's not just the 11. There's 4 or 5 players that are sort of around the first 11. I mean, there's second 11 players as well. There's a support staff. So to get that whole group of sort of 30, 35 people achieve something quite special like that was probably I'd say the highlight of my career, my cricketing career. And in many ways, it provided me more satisfaction than the 8th in the West Indies, the sort of test wins, and even the sort of trophy wins with England and with Middlesex to a large extent. It was, a really special moment to sort of watch it all come together, and to sort of take a step back and just to see a lot of young people really enjoying success. And it's, I say, the disappointing thing is that things have fallen away in the last year or two. But again, and that's something we hope to address. But it's not just the success; it's also the development of young people. To see, I mean, I suppose, when I came and started Middlesex in 2009, sort of over a couple of years, sort of changed the side quite considerably and brought through a lot of the young players at Middlesex, like your Sam Robsons, your John Simpsons, your Stephen Finns, Owen Morgan, although he was sort of still or getting close to the England setup then. I'm trying to think, Darvin Milan, Tim Murtagh, Toby Rowland-Jones. I mean, there's a lot of good young raw talent there, and for a lot of that talent to go and play international cricket and sort of fulfil their dreams. So the fact that Sam Robson's played for England, Toby Rowland-Jones, Darvin Milan, Owen Morgan's had the career that he does, Stephen Finn is obviously had there are lots of things to be extremely proud of, to be honest. And the fact that I've not been, it's their career and they've done it, but to sort of create an environment where people have come through and sort of achieve those dreams is something that you look back on with a lot of satisfaction. And I suppose the challenge now for us at Middlesex is we've got some other decent young cricketers, some older cricketers that sort of still got a few years left in them that still want to get back playing for England, and got to try and create the right environment when they had before. Because I say, if you could put your finger on why things sort of fell away, you'd have been able to address it, wouldn't you? But there's a lot of, I suppose when you do well, it's sort of success is almost like you're drinking this cocktail and it tastes wonderful, but you don't quite know what the ingredients are. But it all seems to come together and produce this wonderful drink or this wonderful taste. And then you're sort of trying to reinvent that cocktail, and it's difficult because people move, people grow up, their careers move on, they play for England. England suddenly becomes a reality to them. They buy a house, they get married, they have children. People's lives move, and sometimes it's quite difficult to sort of get that when everybody's moving and the ingredients are sort of shifting around to sort of get that same taste again. And we haven't managed to do that in the last 2 or 3 years, which has been frustrating.
But you're not done with English cricket, because you did another role, that of being an England selector as well. Was that ironical in the way that you got to be a selector after the selectors treated you in the 90s? And were you more sympathetic? And in the same vein, I want to ask, are you still, do you send New Year cards to Raymond Illingworth?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think now which Ashes it would have been. It would have probably been Hugh Morris, I mean, was obviously the managing director of English cricket, and Hugh stood down from that position. I think it was before the 2004.
15 World Cup, I suppose.
It's 2004. I can't. Yeah,
Yeah.
and Middlesex were obviously doing quite well, and I'd been spoken to about applying for the job to be the England managing director of cricket, but it just didn't feel right at that moment in time for me. And then. But I sort of wanted to be involved. I wanted to help out England if I possibly could. So, and there was Jeff Miller stood down as a selector, and the old selection panel sort of disbanded as such. So I sort of wrote to Jimmy Whittaker and said, look, I'd love to be considered for one of the selectorial positions. Was interviewed for the job and got the job. And really, I really enjoyed it. I mean, there's far more people involved in selection than just 4 people or 3 people, whatever. It's sit in a room and sort of mulling over whether we pick Vince or Milan at number 4 or something like that. There's obviously scouts out there. There's now the analytical work that's taking place, so you can watch every county innings that a batsman has and sort of see their strengths, see their weaknesses. But sort of to sit in a room planning sort of a way forward for a team was really enjoyable. Yes, you cop some flack, you become easy targets, and I suppose one of the biggest reasons why we copped some flack early on was because of Kevin Peterson and the fact that we sort of didn't select Kevin Peterson and decided it was time to move on. He'd been a brilliant cricketer, but it was time to sort of take the side in a slightly different direction. So you get a lot of flack for that. And yeah, there were some nervous afternoons, stressful afternoons watching England play ordinarily and sort of waiting for the criticisms that you're going to get. But actually, to sort of sit there and be responsible, it's a very responsible position because, but equally, you're a dream maker and a dream breaker, aren't you? You're making people's dreams by picking them for England for the first time, allowing them to play international cricket, and unfortunately you can only play 11, so you're also breaking someone's heart by dropping them too. But equally, I think I was very comfortable again with our policy would always rather give someone one more opportunity than they deserve than one fewer. So to give people a decent run to show whether they can perform at that level, and I suppose that's a lot different from the environment when I played, really. I mean, my first summer with England in 1989, England used 29 players in a 6-match series. So when you think about that, it's quite alarming when you pick 11 for the first game, and so that's 11. So, and then the next 5 test matches, there's 18 changes. So that's nearly 4 changes a test. That's a third of the side you're changing every game. And I mean, that was ridiculous. But so our policy was definitely to back people. If we make the decision that they're good enough to back them and to give them a decent chance to show they are. And yeah, I didn't see eye to eye with Mr. Illingworth. He had a view on me that he thought there were better bowlers out there, and again, it probably, I say, cost me that 15, 20 test matches that I probably sit here, the volume of wickets that I'd have liked, another 78 wickets, and feeling he'd done even more. But he's had his views. It was nice to prove him wrong on a few occasions, undoubtedly. But having been a selector yourself, you realise that you've got to make tough calls on players' careers, and it doesn't mean you don't think they're good. It just means that you probably think at this moment in time there's someone slightly better equipped to do the role, to fulfil the role than you.
And is it true that you celebrated in '98 when you took Brian Lara's wicket? Not because you took Brian Lara's wicket, but because you went past Raymond Illingworth on the Test wicket takers list?
I could have done, yeah. I could have done.
Finally, Angus, can I get one message from you to everybody watching and listening to this on what they could do to stay fit or be active during this period of pandemic when everything's under a lockdown?
I think, I mean, the big thing, I mean, obviously with Middlesex, we're managing 20, 25 cricketers, and we've got young cricketers within our system too. So sort of academy and through the age groups. And I think, I mean, I think the biggest issue for me is the emotional, mental well-being, right, as much as the physical. You'll get back into your cricket. You'll get fit. You'll get strong when things open up, because you can it'll happen, and you can do little bits around your house, do some sort of training drills. I know that I think the lockdown in India is greater than that in England, in the fact that we can go out and you can have a run, or you can go for a walk, or you can do some training, as long as you're not out the house for long periods. But to do what you can inside. But I think to keep your mind active, to try and do something productive every day, no matter what it is, whether it's cooking a meal, I don't know, helping other people out, just doing something, so that when you put your head on your pillow each night, you think, well, I've done something today to help someone, and to try and keep yourself busy. Really, I think that's the challenge, because I think if we can come out of this emotionally well, you'll be in a better place then to train, to play cricket, and take things forward. But yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge, or it is a challenge. And for 2 or 3 weeks in England, it was all right. It's not that bad, but I can put up with this. But all of a sudden, the reality that this is going to last a bit longer has hit home in the last week, and the players are finding it. I think everybody's finding it a bit tougher. But it's, I suppose, breaking things down and sort of, I say, trying to not sitting down and feeling sorry for yourself, really. Try and do something, I say, productive, positive, develop yourself, read, learn new skills, and things like that. So try and use the time as well as you can.
Thanks a lot, Angus. It was a real privilege and honor to speak to you. Hope you stay safe, stay indoors, and keep doing well at Middlesex.
Yeah, I hope everyone is well in India, and love to you all. Look after yourselves.
Thanks a lot, Angus.
Pleasure.